Okay. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 39 and 40. We're going to try to get through it all. And so I'll just start with chapter 39. Now, I don't know what the title of the message is, but going back to chapter 37, when the story of Joseph started, and verse 36, it's in verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. So we're going to resume the Joseph story that was interrupted by the story that was the story of Judah and Tamar in chapter 38. So the first readers of Genesis were the second generation that has come out of Egypt under Moses. Because Moses was the author, right? This narrative explained to them why their parents were Egyptian slaves. They said, I came from a slave. Joseph's brothers probably expected that he would be sold as a common laborer in a heavy construction project. They were building the pyramids and they were using the Jews to do them. So they figured, well, he won't last long. Such heavy physical labor under harsh conditions would make a young man's life very short. Yet because of God's mercy, right, Joseph was sold to a rich and important royal officer, Potiphar. Verse 2, now the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So he didn't live in the slave quarters or anything like that. He lived where they had steak, ice cream, milk, everything. He was living pretty good. The Lord was with Joseph. This key phrase of this section is repeated in verses 21 and 23. This phrase indicates that God cared for and protected and blessed Joseph. Joseph occupied a very high station for a slave. He lived and worked in his master's house. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So everything he was doing, he prospered. But Potiphar recognized that Joseph was successful because the Lord was with him. Perhaps Joseph had some effect on his master's spiritual condition. He probably kept hounding him on. You can be saved, Potiphar. Verse 4, so Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. When it said found favor, Joseph exemplified the faithful steward and illustrated the principle that one who is faithful in a little will be given charge over much. You can find that in Matthew 25:21. Verse 5. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the guy said, man, it can't get any better, but it is. What's going on? And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Wow. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house. God commanded Abraham and his descendants to be a blessing to everyone. You know, it's like a promise back in chapter 12. Here Joseph, thrust into a foreign country by the anger of his brothers, brought God's blessing to an Egyptian official's home. What's more, the Egyptian knew that the blessing was from God. He knew. He said, there's something here. This guy is not normal. He's really awesome. Verse 6. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Right? So all that he had, Potiphar's trust in Joseph was so complete that Potiphar had no care except for his menu. I was joking about that. About Felipe, if it's all right to use his name. He does everything around here, and I don't have to worry about anything. The only thing I have to worry about is, am I going to eat donut or coffee cake with my coffee? He gets it all done. But all he had to do was worry about that. So Joseph was handsome, similar to the description of David, or moi. I'm sorry. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. She was getting attracted to him. So Potiphar's wife began to flirt with Joseph. Verse 8, but he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. But he refused. Joseph exemplified the highest standard of personal behavior. The recurring phrase, the Lord was with him. You know, going back to verse 2 and 21-23, helps to explain Joseph's goodness. The empowering presence of God in his life helped Joseph to resist temptation. You know, that's good for all of us to think about and ponder on and meditate. The Lord was with him. Do we want the Lord to be with us always? Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, because it helped him to get through a lot of, you know, temptation, how to resist temptation, especially there. And here's like a princess coming on to him, yet he held his ground. Verse 9, there is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you. You are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So it was as she spoke to Joseph day by day that he did not heed her, to lie with her or to be with her. Every day she was, you know, coming after him, making a proposition, and he was saying, no, no, no. No, sin against God. When he said that, here Joseph not only stood up for his ethical beliefs, but he also told a woman who probably believed in many gods, the pagan gods, about the righteousness of the only true God. Verse 11, but it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside. Man, she was determined, huh? This time, the master's wife caught Joseph alone. That she caught him by his garment and grabbed him, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. So it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside. Now, think about this. The clothing of a slave is, in the hot climate of Egypt, probably did not consist of much. She grabbed Joseph in the ensuing struggle. She wound up holding his garment, and Joseph fled. And it's right, got out of it and took off. Then she called to the men of the house, of her house, and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me. He came to me to lie with me. And I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside." So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside." He has brought, she insulted her husband when she said that in front of other slaves. The term Hebrew is used only 4 times in the book of Genesis. Here it is a racial slur. To mock, the verb suggests racial hatred. The Hamitic Egyptians scorned the Semitic peoples of Canaan. And chapter 43 we'll get into more detail. But the Egyptian slaves must have envied Joseph's success. They said, "Man, this guy, how does he do that? Who's his take?" No. But, okay, where was I messing around? So Potiphar's wife, thank you, must have found ready ears among these men to believe her lies. She had not cried out, of course, but the charge of rape was as serious then as it is in our day. The attempted rape of a master's wife by a foreign slave would have been an exceptional outrage. We would have seen it in all the television headlines, paper, CNN would have been there taping it, right? It's pretty big. So it was, verse 19, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, "Your servant did to me after this manner," that his anger was aroused. The anger of Potiphar is understandable and expected. Man, your wife tells you something like that, you go, ah. Then Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Now when it says into the prison, surprisingly, Potiphar did not simply kill Joseph, because he had the right just to cut his head off right there if he wanted to, kill him. Is it possible that Joseph had so impressed Potiphar during the considerable time he had been in his service? Of course he did. He was an exceptional, servant. He did everything for Potiphar. He looked after him. How could all of a sudden this happen? So Potiphar found himself not fully believing the story his wife told him. Is it possible that Potiphar determined to throw Joseph into the royal prison over which he had command? And he was in charge, so I'll put him over here. Maybe that'll calm my wife down. order to spare Joseph's life. In any case, Joseph wound up in prison for something he had steadfastly refused to do. He held his ground. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. Man. The Lord continued to be with Joseph even in prison. Mercy can be translated loyal love. And then Psalm 35. Here in an Egyptian prison, Joseph experienced God's loyal love. God faithfully kept his promises by staying with his people, even in rough circumstances. Now, God's promises to be with Abraham's descendants, the keeper of the prison, because Joseph is his descendant. The keeper of the prison, this was the warden who was under the captain of the guard, namely Potiphar. So it's kind of the warden of the prison was working for Potiphar. So Potiphar was kind of still looking out for Joseph. 23. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Again, like Potiphar, the prison warden was the same way with them. The Lord made it prosper because of God's blessing. Everything Joseph did prospered. Why? Because the Lord was with him. Psalms 1, we sang that song, that was the first song. 1 to 3. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. Amen?
Amen.
We're going to go to Genesis 40 now. I think we have time. Yeah, I think so. So, Genesis 40. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. Now the butler and the baker of the king were important offices in the royal court. So when it says offend, stands for the word ordinarily translated as sinned. Its principal meaning is to miss the mark. The nature of their offenses is not explained here. Verse 3, so he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. Let me see if it says something here. The reference to the house implies that there were two holding areas for prisoners in this situation. One was for the prison proper. The other was a type of house arrest associated with, but not in the prison itself. So this is where Joseph was in charge. He was in charge of the prison and in charge of the halfway house, the more lenient place. So he was there. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them. And he served them, so they were in custody for a while. As a trustee of the prison, do we know what the trustee is? He's awarded a lot of like leadership roles, and he's trusted really well. The word trustee. He's trusted with a lot of stuff, sometimes keys to go in and out. As a trustee of the prison, Joseph also served the high officials who were under house arrest, awaiting the disposition of the charges against them. Now, when we hear about house arrest, we see